Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping straight into the literal mechanics of human reproduction and the clinical interventions we use to solve infertility. And we're not just going to talk about these concepts abstractly. We're treating the screen like an interactive whiteboard. We'll be using explicit labels, micro-cutaway views, and step-by-step flowcharts so you can see exactly how these microscopic systems actually operate.
Take a look at this massive statistic on the screen. 15%. That number highlights how many couples worldwide face infertility issues. It immediately grounds us in the real-world scale of the problem we're dealing with. We are talking about millions of people relying on advancements in assisted reproductive technologies. So understanding these mechanics isn't just about passing your next test. It's really about understanding the modern medical interventions that help create human life.
Here's our game plan for today. We'll start with the infertility challenge, cover the basics of human reproduction, map out the female reproductive system, compare clinical treatments like AI versus IVF, and finally wrap up with some exam tips.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, the basics of human reproduction. Literally, the biological foundation of how our species continues. So let's get our foundational vocabulary straight before we go any further. The absolute core components of all of this, they're called gametes. If we zoom in from the human level down to the cellular level, like you can see in that magnified insert right there, gametes are simply specialized male and female sex cells. Sexual reproduction strictly requires the combination of genetic material from two parents, and all of that crucial information is physically carried inside these labeled gametes.
Now, this whole process follows a really strict chronological flowchart. Step 1 is always gamete formation, actually creating those specialized cells. Then, step 2 is fertilization, which is where the genetic material physically combines. Step 3 is embryonic development as the new organism grows. And finally, step 4 is birth. If you ever need to sequence this on an exam, just follow those exact directional arrows.
Let's actually tackle a direct exam question together to really lock this in. It asks, which of the following are characteristics of sexual reproduction? Well, the correct answers are that it requires a male and a female organism, and it involves sex cells. This perfectly highlights how sexual reproduction mechanically necessitates the presence and physical combination of both male and female gametes. You literally need two distinct sources to create one new individual. Moving right along to Section 2, the female reproductive system, where we'll map out the specific internal mechanisms.
Think of the ovaries as the primary manufacturing centers of the female reproductive system. As the callouts here highlight, they pull some serious double duty. First, they physically produce the eggs, the female gametes. But second, and check out the outward directional arrows here, they also drive vital reproductive hormones like estrogen and progesterone out into the broader system.
So following the directional path of the egg, step 1 is ovulation. That's when the egg is released directly from the ovary. It then moves right into the fallopian tube for step 2. Now this fallopian tube acts as the critical structural site for step 3, fertilization. But, and this is a huge but, that only happens if a sperm cell is present in that exact location at the exact right time. And, none of this intricate mechanical system actually activates until puberty. You see that gradient on the screen? That represents this massive systemic shift. Puberty is essentially the hormone-driven transition phase from childhood into sexual maturity. It's this exact hormonal kickstart that physically preps the entire body, turning on the microscopic processes we just mapped out so that gamete formation and ovulation can even begin.
All right, Section 3, treating infertility, AI versus IVF. This is where we look at the incredible clinical interventions used for those biological bottlenecks. Before we get into the actual clinical solutions, we need to clear up a massive trap I see all the time. Listen, infertility is absolutely not just a female issue. It's a huge mistake to think that. The truth is, these biological bottlenecks frequently come from factors in either partner, or honestly both. The second major trap, mechanically confusing our two primary interventions, artificial insemination, or AI, and in vitro fertilization, or IVF.
Check out this side-by-side comparison because it perfectly breaks down the difference. Over on the left, we've got AI. This is entirely an internal procedure, literally placing sperm directly inside the female reproductive system to help natural fertilization happen. But on the right, IVF is completely different. With IVF, the egg is extracted and the actual fertilization happens entirely externally. It's done outside the body in a lab before the embryo is implanted back inside. Internal placement versus external fertilization. That is the core mechanical difference you've got to memorize. And that brings us to Section 4, exam tips, and our final recap to really solidify your mental model.
Let's quickly run down our foundational pillars on the whiteboard from top to bottom. 1. Sexual reproduction strictly demands the physical combination of gametes from two parents. 2. The female system is absolutely critical for egg production and fertilization. 3. Puberty is the hormonal trigger that preps the body. 4. Infertility is a shared biological challenge impacting both partners. And 5. AI and IVF serve as two very distinct mechanical interventions to bypass those bottlenecks.
So, here's my absolute best strategy for your exam prep. Treat your study sessions exactly like this explainer. I mean it. Physically grab a pen and practice drawing and labeling these biological diagrams yourself. Draw the vectors, use the component labels. If you can visually map out the exact physical path of an egg and explicitly draw the difference between an internal AI procedure and an external IVF extraction, well, you won't just be memorizing definitions anymore. You'll literally master the underlying mechanics.
As you're mastering all these structural biology concepts, I want to leave you with one final thought. With assisted reproductive technologies like IVF and AI advancing at just lightning speed, literally bypassing biological constraints that have been around for millions of years, how do you think our foundational medical and ethical definitions of human creation are going to keep evolving in the future? It's pretty wild to think about. Keep sketching those diagrams, keep tracking those mechanical processes, and hey, thanks so much for joining me on this explainer.